directions in the school.
Alright.
It's between two pots.
We are
So,
Wednesday.
side deck is a little bit, but,
the December 18th CPA committee meeting.
just kidding.
First thing is approval of minutes from September, because we've not had a meeting since September. So did everybody get everything? There's no vote, yes?
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Thank you.
I'll second that motion.
Gary seconded. Everybody okay?
Yep.
Good,
Aye.
thank you. Jamie, do you want to go over our balances now, or do you want to wait till later?
Sure.
Okay.
We have approximately 52,800 reserved in open space, $27 in historic preservation, 101,812 in affordable housing, 280,000 in the reserve fund, and 988,000 in the undesignated fund, for a total of 1.4 million. And the committee had set aside 400,000 for the Manhattan Rail Trail project, which brings that to
One, okay.
just over 1 million.
Okay.
So we have really 400 come off the 1.4.
Yep.
Yeah, well, I mean.
That we set aside, I know we set it aside, so it'd be 1 million. It's done, if it's approved.
Yes.
So, yeah, three applications. One is a old one, which is the Manhattan Rail Trail, Justice here now. And then we have Task Comment, Conservation Trust, and the continuation of the Parks and Rec application that we delayed last year. So I think we want to go over the rail trail one first. So if you guys remember in August, is that right, Judy? We set aside 400,000, or was it September?
I think it was
No,
September.
August.
Yep, the grant was due in August.
Okay, thank you. So we set aside $400,000, and it was sort of pending the approval process through the state. So we did not make a commitment, but we made a pledge to think about it. There's a better way to say that, so you can tell me. And we did get answers to the questions Jamie sent out to us. I'm moving over Ed's shoulder. No, it's fine. So we had questions around maintenance. So the mill owners, the 3 mill owners, are providing a minimum of $3,000 annually to the Friends of the Manhattan Rail Trail for upkeep and maintenance of the improved corridor. So that's the space between Ferry and Union is what we're talking about. And then the mill owners will work with the Friends of the Manhattan Rail Trail to either provide some sort of memorandum of understanding or something like that. The mayor has agreed that the city is going to pay for the cost of lighting between Legion and Union from the existing city light account. I don't know why this matters, but apparently one street light was removed.
It's an offset. So basically, we're
Okay.
saving money off the streetlights account because of a pole was down and taken down,
14 cents.
whatever it is. It's a game.
All right. And DPW is maintaining the detention basins. So those were answers to our questions. So I don't know if there needs to be further discussion. Jessica is here to answer any questions that you might have.
Just real quick, everything else set. Outstanding.
As we received the grant, we've worked with the state to be able to lend the phase 2 award of the phase 3 for one contract. So we signed a contract with our designer who is doing the construction bid document. We're projecting to go out to bid here within January and February. So we're ready to roll. We're ready to roll. We anticipate construction beginning in the spring again.
Questions from folks?
So it sounded like 3,000 in maintenance would go to Friends of Manhattan. They will or won't be in charge of maintenance of the lights. Do you have a sense of like who is, aside from the electricity costs for running the lights, the
Like if a
lights
bulb
get
goes out.
damaged or broken or whatever, is that on the city or is that?
I presume it would be on the city, yes.
I've got a question. What are the Friends of the Manhattan Rail Trail going to be doing with their maintenance money? What exactly are they going to be doing? Are they moving snow or are they what are they doing?
They're here, so if you, Barbara, I saw some,
Yeah.
here she is.
Well, it's, you know, until it's actually built, we probably won't know exactly, but for sure mowing, there will be,
Okay, I just want to know what you're going to spend money on, that's all.
yeah, you know, until we see it exactly, we probably won't know. And, you know, but for sure mowing and other, you know, general terms of like what we do along the whole bike path. Yeah.
Graffiti removal,
Yeah.
if
I
a
know
tree
there's a
comes
distinct difference.
down.
Anybody that walks that, you can see where the Easthampton line is, the Northampton line.
Yep.
It's like night and day. Easthampton line is so much cleaner, it's so much nicer. You don't see no random trees, but soon you get on the Northampton side, you got stuff crawling all over the place. It's just
Yep,
not
we
the
do our
same.
best.
And that's what the $3,000 is for.
And that's a minimum, I mean, the mill owners can speak to this because they're all here, but, you know, we did discuss at the rail trail meeting that if the maintenance costs exceeded $3,000 because of these improvements, then they would be willing to put in more money annually if, and they can negotiate that on an annual basis on that amount.
Barbara, would that essentially be from Ferry to Union, or do I have that right? or no?
That is the stretch we're talking about.
Essentially,
Mhm. Yep.
Other questions from the committee? Heather?
Do we need to move this
We
now?
do.
I'll make a motion that we approve 400,000 for the Manhattan Rail improvements.
Second the motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? All right, motion passed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, before I go, this is on
Oh,
your next
just-
project.
okay, yes.
I didn't have time to write a letter of support for the PCT application, so I need to scoot, obviously.
Yeah.
But I just want to say that, that as an accessible trail, I've just completed the ADA assessment for our open space plan, and it's such a huge priority and a need in the city to have an accessible, a universally designed accessible trail in the city, because we really don't have any that go into the trail system. And so our plan has identified this as a priority, and so I'm offering my support as a city planner for that project. So I just wanted to verbally say that before I had to scoot out. Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Thank you.
So, that is a nice segue into. Yes. Yes. No.
Work faster.
Just let me know.
I'm just trying to get that motion out. What counts are rail trail?
Well, you have to pull out of
General.
general, well, yeah, out of the undesignated and move it into.
I amend my motion. From general.
From the undesignated.
Yes, there you go.
Oh, yeah. I was down there today.
Right, and do you want to close out the open space account and then?
Yeah.
I'd get an update, so if I could, I came here, I can kind of talk about
Good? Okay, so. As Common Conservation Trust. It is, as Jessica nicely said, for the creation of a universally accessible trail at the Brickyard brook area And the total project cost is $310, the CPA request is $260. They have Concon permission finally after the culvert issue got cleared up. Am I remembering that right?
It's in the process, yeah.
Okay.
Looks good.
Okay.
I know something different.
One of the culverts.
One of the colors, yes.
Okay. Letters of support from a bunch of folks. And Jamie had one, well, you had a couple of thoughts, but one was that around prevailing wage, right? That they actually don't need to pay prevailing wage because it's on private.
Right, because the Conservation Trust owns the land, it's not city property. And the city is not managing the project. By my interpretation of the CPA's prevailing wage guides, it wouldn't need to be paid prevailing wages on the project. So that would see a cost savings.
So that's one thing.
Are we still bound by competitive bidding, the bidding system and everything else though? Mass general laws for that?
I mean, I think the CPA would require you to
Okay.
have competitive bids.
Okay.
But you would not be subject to the prevailing wage or the public procurement or public purchasing laws, to my understanding.
That's
I
interesting.
can look
Okay.
into that further.
Wasn't that? Unless we stipulate it.
Right.
Wasn't that driven by our state grant?
Please, were you
So that's one thing
No.
to note, though we don't know what that will do to the cost. So presumably lower it. Tammy, what was the other? The C and F. Right.
Oh, yeah, there was, it looked like there was just a typo, in the application. The budget request, it breaks it up into, A through H. C is listed as a trail pathway, and F is listed as the repair of the East Green Street stream culvert and site improvements. And the total project cost said not including C, but I think they meant not including F. So we want to.
Yeah,
that's right.
It's not including the Green Street, which the letters could have been changed around, so.
Okay.
But I mean, I think the total cost is correct, it was just the item that they were excluding.
Right.
So it's not including F, is that right?
Not including.
That's correct, that's correct. It should be, the total cost does not include F, which is the repair for the Green Street culvert, which is currently going on right now.
But the total cost amount is correct.
Correct, yes.
Okay. So I'm assuming we have a bunch of folks in the room. They're here to support it. So we usually, I don't know if you've seen how we operate, but we can open it up for you all to speak, and then we will ask a few questions. So whoever wants to go first around this, please feel free.
My name is Marty Klein. I'm a longtime board member of the trust, and I submitted the application, so I guess you can blame me first. And we have a lot of our board members here tonight, so I can just introduce everybody. It's Bill Burkhart. This is Sue Walls, our acting treasurer. Diane McLean, our vice president. Roger Anderson, board member. Linda Bush, one of our volunteers. Tom Lotzenheiser, board member. Molly Goodwin, a board member. John Bader, president of the trust. And Bill Cannon is also joining us, and he's the landscape architect who put the plan together.
Thank you.
So, I guess you want your plan? Yeah. Do you want me to just kind of get up and talk about the project a little bit, Marty?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you. Again, my name is Bill Cannon. I'm a landscape architect. I have an office here in town. I also am a longtime member of the Easthampton Conservation Trust. A couple of years ago, we embarked on this project to work on connecting trails with the new acquisition of this parcel. It's kind of affectionately called Mutter Field right now. That was purchased by from the Mutter family, and it directly abuts some present open space land that the trust owns in this area right in here. This is East Street, and so we're west of East Street. Mountain View Farm is to the north of our site. And you can see kind of to the west of the new parcel, which is highlighted in green in here, a very densely populated neighborhood. And most notably, East Green Street is this long street right here with a cul-de-sac ends right at the property. So this at the cul-de-sac provides access to the parcel, and that was pretty conveniently used by the Mutter family. That they live right here in this house right here. And also there is frontage on East Street over here. So you can see how the land kind of straddles through between East Green Street and East Street. Presently, the Brickyard Brook Conservation Area, you can see, is highlighted in all this light green area that kind of is on the westerly side of Mountain View Farm. And there are a whole myriad and a series of trails all throughout this piece of land. They traverse the brooks, they cross the brooks. They take advantage of interesting scenery. The terrain, the flora, fauna, everything you can possibly imagine. And this has all been very meticulously taken care of and maintained by the Easthampton Conservation Trust. And mind you, this is just one piece of land that they maintain in the city here.
It's our most heavily used property.
And because of the density that it abuts and everything else, it's probably no wonder.
Yeah,
Right.
it's convenient
Yeah.
to those neighborhoods.
Right. So this parcel right here is kind of a win situation for the trust, in that it helps to extend some continuity and the open space in this area. Also physically, we can take advantage of extending the trail systems within the current conservation area into the new parcel. And there are even hopes and ambitions of perhaps extending those even farther. But it's important to note that because it does abut the existing conservation area, there's a tremendous advantage in here that we can kind of utilize, and kind of, again, extending the open space and extending the connectivity of the trails in the area.
This is a, sorry, Bill, this is a photograph of the property that I took, and it's on the cover of a calendar that Jean-Pierre Pache from Big Red Frame is doing as a fundraiser for us for the project, so you get an idea of what it looks like in that.
The existing Brickyard Brook Conservation Area is densely wooded, and that wooded edge extends along the north property line of this parcel that we're talking about tonight. But it's kind of punctuated with an open meadow in the middle of there, and it's pretty gently sloping. There's a brook that extends along the East Green Street side, where there are some existing culverts that cross across the brook, and also even over on East Street, where accessibility was created by putting some culverts across a small brook as well to gain access to the open field part. So in the past, I guess it's been pretty heavily used, cultivated, or whatever, you know, and these access points have been used for decades,
It was
right?
used by Jim Mutter to ride his horse, and you know, he kept the horse in the field, and they had a carriage barn there too.
So it was a grazing pasture, is that what it was before?
Yeah, or grazing and riding. Yep.
So a little bit of an enlarged view of that particular parcel kind of shows what we were kind of contemplating. Again, with East Green Street, the end of East Green Street cul-de-sac being an important access point to the property, where we have under development right now the repairs to the culverts. The culverts had kind of suffered over the years some aging. They were kind of improperly built, and so that caused a lot of degradation in the fill that was put over the pipes to create access between East Green Street and the open field. So I'm happy to say that we're in the process. We went through the notice of intent process with the Conservation Commission and got approval to kind of repair this culvert. It is presently being repaired, and we hope to have it pretty much complete within the next week and a half. They were building the stone wall on the up gradient side, and they had it, I was out there this morning to take a look at what's going on. It's about halfway completed. And they had some of the channel kind of shaped and everything else, which was part of the work that we wanted to kind of do down there. We're also putting guardrails along either side of the causeway, if you will, that would connect up between East Green Street and the rest of the parcel.
The East Green Street entrance is important to the property because it will allow us to get a mowing machine in so that we can maintain the property once the trail is built, and so that was really the first step that we had to take in order to get the rest of the project going. So it's critical to the rest of the project.
It's a favorite route of all the neighborhoods, the East Green Street and Holyoke Street neighborhood area. I see people
Right,
down
so
there
it
all
provides
the time.
another entrance to the property. The entrance for the Brickyard Brook property that's probably used the most now is at the end of Mount Tom Avenue. So there'll be two new entrances provided by this project.
Yeah, I think it works out to the advantage, you know, as I mentioned before, that it's in a pretty densely, it's at the edge of a pretty densely populated neighborhood. So it works out terrifically from an accessibility standpoint and from a proximity standpoint. So what we were also looking at was another point of accessibility, and that is from East Street, over on the easterly side of the property. In order to kind of provide adequate accessibility, we felt we needed a little bit of a parking area that cars could use instead of parking on East Street. It's on a kind of a little bit of a broad curve, so it's pretty dangerous and problematic to be parking alongside the streets. So it was important to kind of provide a facility on our site. With that, we're developing a walkway that would traverse the grades, the new grades that we would have to introduce to develop the new parking area, to slope and get to the lower grades of the existing field and meet the grades at in this area here just before it crosses the brook. We've kind of worked through a very detailed plan for that right now that I've kind of worked out a lot of details, and I've kind of donated my time to the Conservation Commission in order to work out a design and to come up with the cost estimates that we're submitted to the committee here, and including the time to kind of even design the rest of the property. But this whole area right here will need to be brought before the Conservation Commission again, and we have to get a notice of intent to do that work. We probably will have to kind of modify the plans a little bit for some drainage issues. We want to introduce a fair amount of landscaping. Some of that is important based on discussions with the neighbors for some privacy. We're probably going to have to introduce a few other things for runoff mitigation from the parking lot as well. But the important thing is that this would provide another access point to the property, both parking for handicap, and the beginning of a pathway that would take you from the parking area down gradient, and then we have a smaller brook crossing that we also have to do a few repairs for as well. And that would lead us into a pathway that would take us around the property, preferably around the edges of the property, and kind of looping back on itself. And it would also provide opportunities for us to kind of interconnect with the existing properties to the north at the existing Brickyard Brook Conservation Area, and obviously to connect in with a pathway that would extend out to Green Street. I've also included some sketches within the proposal that kind of show you what we're kind of thinking of in terms of the trail system for the site, and we're kind of adopting a unique system where it's built on existing grade. And there are batter boards that use chocks on the site to support the batter boards and contain the fill and the surface material for the pathway. We also
Basically, what Bill's saying is that the trail will be built on the surface of the ground. It won't be excavated in the ground. So there'll be a layer of rock, and then I think there's a fabric barrier on top of that, and then there'll be crushed stone dust on top of that, and that will be the surface of the trail. And there are boards along the side, and as required for accessibility standards, I think those have to be 2 inches high along the edges of the trail.
Because it'll be raised above grade, so the 2-inch lip on it will prevent wheelchair people from, falling off the edge. We're also the thought was that we wanted to provide a shelter on site that would be connected to the trail system. So I did a little sketch that I included with the proposal, and we thought that a nice place to put that would be in this area, just off of the pathway system, that would take advantage of the long view across Martyr Field and also to the mountains. That was kind of important to the trust. Around that area, in a tree grove that abuts the brook, we thought that would be a great place to also include some picnic tables, a few city benches, and everything else. So that would happen in this area as well. So it's basically a brief description of what we're doing. It was, as you can tell, it was kind of been quite a bit of thought put into the project at this point. And I've done a considerable amount of drawing and design work on the project that we just need to take to its finality, and also take to the Conservation Commission, develop a project manual for bidding. The CPA money would help finance getting that to this finality.
As I mentioned in the application, we received a grant from Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreational Trail Program. We got that grant, I think it was last June, and they awarded us $47,000 for this project.
Is there a timeline on when that needs needs to be expended?
I'm sorry?
Is there a timeline on when that needs to be spent?
We have to use that by the end of December 2015, but we'll be using it before then because the bulk of it is going to be going towards the East Green Street entrance. And whatever's left over from that will go towards the picnic table area.
So that 47K is partially funding this 240 already?
That's right. We haven't received that money. It's a reimbursement kind of a thing. So once we get invoiced for the cost of that repair, we pay it, and then we pass that along to DCR, and we get reimbursed for it.
So what that money's doing is part of this summary of costs and the repair of
Yeah.
costs.
Well, it's paying the bulk of that line item for the East Green Street culvert repairs. It's about $33,000.
Let me make myself clear.
That's item F.
There's a total
Yeah,
project cost of $240,000, $115,000 that I see at the bottom of this estimate. Of that $240,000, can I subtract the $47,000 that they're...
No, that doesn't include that repair, so that actually goes on top of
That
it.
answers my question. So what we're talking about is $240,115 that's itemized on your estimate of
Correct,
costs.
yes. Yes, sir.
It's a very, very beautiful park. It's nice renderings, but when I start going through the costs of this, I mean, we helped purchase this property with CPA funds already, didn't we?
Yes.
And I know that the questions that we're asking when we went through it, that it was a good idea, it was a good project and everything, but normally when this committee funds purchases a property, they don't usually fund building full parks on this, and this is what I see here. And what stands out on me on the costs, okay, are some things like 46 shrubs for $300 a piece. 6 trees at $550 a piece. And bark mulch, I can see that, $28 a yard, and seeding. Landscaping costs in one section is $18,000. And when we looked at this and bought it, the whole idea is, hey, this is a piece of open space that's, open space and natural. And now what you're doing is you're coming here, the thing about getting a handicap accessible trail in there, I mean, that makes a lot of sense to be able to do that. We talked about it when we purchased the property about the parking, that makes sense. But when I look at this, there's a lot of let's make this pretty here, where it could be growing naturally and we could still be just dealing with putting the trail in.
Well, in order to build an accessible trail, you can't just clear a path through a field. There's standards that you have to meet.
Does a standard include 43 trees at $300
Oh, well,
a piece?
I think that Bill would probably explain that was based on prevailing wage rates, that we thought...
Trees?
He's the landscape guy, don't yell at me.
Calm down.
Okay.
It does seem high, I agree with you.
And part of it too was I'm assuming, the mitigation for the neighbors. Is that?
That's correct. If I can just provide a little bit of perspective, most of that landscaping would occur in this area right in here, where we've got to do a fair amount of site work to get the parking lot in there, okay? And along with that, we've introduced some landscaping that would help anchor the new project, the grading that has to be done for the project and everything else. And also to help kind of buffer the view a little bit from the neighbor, especially right to the north of the project.
I don't
okay?
understand. Why do you want to buffer the view of a natural area? The whole idea of developing a natural area was to have it the site.
Well, okay, we're talking about intensively having to rework this area up along East Street, okay? It's an area that is pretty open right now, I granted, but it also has to be pretty significantly altered in order to regrade the area, to get the parking lot in there, to develop some side slopes the handicap, the
What
ramp.
was that word, develop? Oh, okay. We're gonna develop the open space into a park.
It doesn't happen
Well,
on its own. Last year, we spent $20,000 at our Pomeroy Meadow property developing arguably one of the most beautiful trails in the city. So, did we destroy the open space? No. We made it accessible to the public, and the purpose of this project is to make it accessible, to make the outdoors and nature accessible to a broader audience that has been able to use our properties in the past.
Am I right in understanding as well that it would be the view of the cars that you're trying to obscure from the neighboring houses?
Yes, the view of the cars, right. That's one of the issues. Right,
I
right,
think-
and, you know, he was a little concerned about maybe some of the activity from, you know, people coming through the area and everything else. And so we worked with them on trying to, you know, incorporate some landscaping that would help, you know,
Maintain his privacy.
you know, maintain some of the privacy. I have no doubt that what I've designed in here would help blend in with that site. You know, we're using native shrubbery, you know, and some red maple trees that would help kind of anchor that whole end of the site down. Plus, we've also got to get involved in putting in some rain gardens in a few areas to direct some of the runoff from the parking lot. And these rain gardens have to be vegetated and everything else. So we've got a little bit of an issue that we've got to kind of incorporate into the site as well. But it is the one area, admittedly, where we have to do some, you know, some site work to, you know, to I'll use the word again, to develop the area a little bit, to provide the necessary access and some parking for the site, which is going to be safe for the public. And designing it off-site is important. You can't, you know, just having parking all along the side of the streets and everything else in that area would not be conducive for the situation there. So
when Bill talks about screening of the activities too, beside the cars, I think it's the same situation that the city or whatever ran into with the rail trail too, and going through, you know, neighborhood areas where people who lived in those areas were in that position of, you know, I don't know if I want to see everybody walking behind my backyard. So even though people were used to seeing the natural property, they might not want to see the people who are walking on the trails. And so some screening for that felt necessary. And I think, we didn't really talk about this, but I think there's also a sense of we're trying to create a space that it's in the middle of a neighborhood, but we want it to feel like you're really far away when you're out there, which is what we're trying to accomplish for people. So we're also screening some of the
You mean you want it to
house
look
use
like
from that.
this?
We want it to look like that after a trail is built in the middle. of it.
it's gonna look like-
Just like
I mean,
that.
that has nothing on it right now, so
It's
it
gonna look like
won't
that.
look like that.
The center of this is open space, and if I look at the tree line that's there now, why do you need all those new trees there? I just don't understand why you're gonna cut down trees and plant new ones.
Two purposes. You're only doing the landscaping basically in the small field by East Street where the parking lot goes.
That's not what that picture shows.
Well, that's not, no, we're talking about.
yes,
43 trees, show me 43 bushes on that picture.
they are elaborated on another plan, but they're all in this.
There's 43
Right,
shrubs
yes,
there,
right.
in that one area.
Yes, right.
You're gonna need all that,
Yeah.
one, to soften the.
43 $300 shrubs, those are big shrubs.
All right,
Well,
Have you ever gone shopping?
Calm down for a
I
second.
got the answer. so-
okay.
Do you ever go shopping to the Hadley Garden Center? If you do, you'll see the prices are expensive.
I did, and a $300 shrub is.
Well, we're
Well,
talking
he's talking
about
about trees.
labor costs to install it as well, so it's not just the cost of the plant.
All right.
Look,
I'm good.
It's an estimate.
That's an estimate.
It's an estimate of what I think, and what I've been, what's been conventional in the industry to kind of estimate, what a project might take.
That's the worst case scenario. We can
it-
probably get it cheaper.
It includes not only the purchase of the plant, but the installation. And typically, the installation on these bid jobs are 100% of what, from 75 to 100% of what the actual cost of a plant is. So unfortunately, with prevailing wage rates, which is what I basically was kind of anticipating we would have to go through. We're in that realm.
I understand.
Okay, but-
I think I only have one point that I'm trying to make, is that we could build the parking lot and the trail without these exorbitant landscaping costs.
Well, I think that's your terminology. I don't think it's exorbitant. It's part of the cost of the allowance that we've set aside to do some landscaping because it's important. Because as I briefly outlined, we have to do a fair amount of disturbance and grading up in this area to get this parking lot to be accessible from East Street. And also, we're talking about developing a pathway that's like a handicap ramp. It's about 100 feet long to get down to the existing grade. It has to have railings on it, gravel railings on it. I've got to put in a little bit of a retaining wall on one side of it so that the grades can work with a sloped sidewalk. So we've got embankment grades and everything else that I proposed planting, and can be vegetated a lot of different ways, but the way I've got it proposed, the way I've got it designed, I've included this budget to take care of properly vegetating these areas that need to be graded. That cost is approximate.
Table the
But-
discussion right now. So I totally
Okay.
hear what you're saying, Ed, I hear what you're saying, but I think I want to let other members of the committee have questions, because I'm sure that folks do have questions.
Bill, I have one on going back to the East Green side, the cul-de-sac. And maybe I can get help from the fire chief here, but the two streets that go up, this isn't part of your project, but the two streets that go up off East Street up to the mountain, Reservation Road is one and the other is,
Chapin.
Chapin. Thank you. We, in the council, continually get complaints, parking complaints from the residents of the people that access the end and park and go up into the trails. In other words, they don't want parking, there's too many cars. And have you got together with it sounds like you're doing a lot for this East Street, but have you got together on Green and talked to the neighbors, especially the end neighbors? I know one's the Mutter property, but these other neighbors about cars, are they supportive? Has anyone talked to them? Because, once this opens and if there's several.
Not only Alice Mutter or.
I know where Mutter's is. I don't know.
And King, Mr. King, Michael King on the opposite side.
Mm-hmm.
We worked with him, and he gave us the go-ahead to go through that area because he owns a little bit stretch there in that entranceway. Yeah, he's all for it.
Okay.
I've talked to a lot of neighbors in that East Green Street area. They're all for it. They're glad we saved that open space.
Okay. No, I'm sure they're glad they opened space. A lot of people are glad the mountain isn't developed too. But once people start parking in front of their house, then they come to the city council and say, "Hey, I want no parking signs," and
The property-
I don't want people parking in front of my house. And
Yeah.
I'm just
But
seeing if this is something that you have done.
Yeah, another property, the one that I mentioned, Pomeroy Meadow property, That has an entrance at the end of Ranch Avenue, which is
Yes, I
also
know.
a cul-de-sac.
I was on there.
And we,
And you have
we're
the-
not aware of any complaints.
No,
of
you don't get the traffic
traffic
like you would
problems
at
there.
this, a regular park or anything like that, you know. It just trickles.
I'm not saying it is a problem, I'm just saying, I hope that
Yeah.
it's something that you guys have gone out and.
No, we-
because
no.
I just, if you don't have if the neighbors, you know.
That's the
You can have
first
the
thing-
best project that goes in there, and then
Yeah.
if there's a problem after.
No, that's the first thing we do is go to the neighbors.
And I think people that are gonna bring their cars are gonna go to East Street. And the people that are gonna walk are gonna come down East Green the same way they do Mount Tom now
Because it
to
is-
access
it is a
Brickyard
dense
Grove.
neighborhood.
It's a dense neighborhood.
And then, Bill, one other and there's a lot to digest here, obviously, and I certainly, I don't know the other numbers, but at some point I gotta, I've been by here, and I wanna take another ride and kinda look at them all, but the culverts and forgive me, because I'm just going back, I just got this week, and in the paper, there was something about the state wanted some type of culverts, and I think I read your comments that you thought you had a way to do it at less cost. Did I get that right? Was this a?
I remember what you're talking about.
Huh?
I remember what you're talking
Remember what I'm talking about? There was articles, this is a while back, when we were talking about some culverts, they were talking about some culverts in this area. I don't know if you remember the.
There was an article on it.
There was an article in the Gazette about how the state wanted the culvert repaired, and I believe there were some comments from you saying that you thought there were engineering ways or ways to engineer it at a little lesser cost. And I was wondering if the state has signed off on everything here. I know there's a DEP out in the Conservation Commission, but I didn't know if the state has signed off on all this culvert work. is what I'm-
Well, in fact, they did. That's because that, it was part of the notice of intent process that we went through for the East Green Street improvement. And we modified the plans to address those concerns by both DEP and the Conservation Commission. That kind of dragged out the process. I don't know, it was at least 3 or 4 months.
Well, this is going back a while.
Right.
I remember just reading a Gazette.
Right, and we finally came around where, admittedly, I teamed up with an engineer to prepare the notice of intent, and we got it filed, and the engineer was able to discuss issues with DEP about it, and and help to clarify our whole intent for the project, and we were able to modify the plans slightly to accommodate that as well.
Is that also on the East Street side as opposed to the East?
Well, the East Street side
You
is...
did say there's some culverts over there.
Yeah, the East Street side is a little bit of a different animal. There, over the years, there's been kind of culverts piled on top of each other out there. The bigger one is a metal pipe that is kind of rusted away in a few places. So the idea is to go in there and kind of parch the inside of the pipe, reinforce it with concrete and stone at the same diameter of the pipe. And then riprap the edges of the embankment. The problem we had at East Green Street, which was uncovered when we finally got into the project a little bit, was pipes were kind of jury-rigged together, admittedly, a little bit. We had smaller pipes going into bigger pipes, and they left large openings where the soil, the fill, got sucked down into the pipes and created a collapse. So we were able to, that's what we uncovered when we got there. I thought it might have been damage to the actual pipe that was broken or something, so it was falling in. But it turns out it was because of the way the pipes were put together.
The trust had to spend, what did we spend, $7,000 or $10,000 for Bill and the engineer in order to get the NOI? Because we just don't have the expertise on our board in order to get through that process.
Yeah.
So that's part of the cost there, was that, I think it was $10,000?
Yeah, the trust appropriated, I believe, $7,500 for us, for the engineer and I to kind of take it through the notice of intent process with the Conservation Commission. We've kind of expended about 2/3 of that right now. There are some costs for monitoring the project on a weekly basis, and we provide reports back to the Conservation Commission on the progress of the construction and also the maintainability of the site with the erosion control structures in place there.
Sure. I just want to say, I appreciate this project. My understanding is that neighborhood with East Green, really in order to access Brickyard before, they'd have to go around to Mount Tom, which is pretty much a long haul for people in that neighborhood. So I think this would be a nice addition for that neighborhood. I'm curious about this field, or about the meadow, because I hear what you're saying as far as, the open space, and maintaining it a little bit, so it looks like a meadow, but I also understand there's gonna be a bunch of mowing. So how?
We mow it once a year.
Is
to
that
keep-
how, is
keep
that the
down
intention?
vegetation.
Yeah.
Keep
Right,
down the
we've got a
vegetation.
lot of invasives growing in that field, and so we need to control those.
I know you'd have to do something with it, I was just curious exactly what the
Yeah,
plan was.
most of our
for the
properties
meadow.
where we have meadows, we mow them once a year, usually late fall, so that any ground nesting birds will be able to do their thing in season. So we do the same approach here.
The intention was to kind of maintain it as a tall grass type of meadow, not, short,
Yeah,
type
sure.
of thing, so.
Sure. And there's no issue with the mowing equipment or anything getting over the
No, we got,
rim around your trails or anything
Well,
like that?
what we're gonna do is that rim will be modified in a couple of strategic places, so, and kind of beveled, so that mowing equipment can kind of drive up and over and back down the pathway to get to the areas that are segregated from the pathway. So that would be part of the design of the pathways.
That sounds good. As always, I'm mainly just concerned about unintended consequences, things when you build something and something pops up later on, like, a field is different than woods when it comes to people who want to use it and what they would want to use it for.
yeah, it's
So
an artificial setup for the most part.
So do you have any
If
thoughts
you
on
if you left it alone, it would be woods.
limitations of use at all
Yeah.
for this, sort of open space that you're now making very accessible to people?
Well, it's accessible now. I mean, I've walked there many times.
We keep a path mowed around it
Yeah.
as it is now.
So it's accessible.
So
We're just.
soccer, pickup games?
No,
and other
it's not,
kinds of things, or-
the,
This is what I'm asking you.
no,
You're basically
it's
creating
not gonna be a
parking lot.
lawn. It's gonna be a mowed meadow. It's got briars.
We're not trying to compete with the park.
No, I know you're not. I know you're not. I'm just, and I'm just talking out loud about
The
unintended
maintenance, yeah.
consequences. But you're basically making a parking lot where it's very off of East Street, which is a fairly busy thoroughfare, where you get people coming from Easthampton or Northampton or whatever, and this is great. And you could walk through a secluded wooded area, it looks like, to get back to this field where, for the most part, nobody has any idea what's going on back there. So I just was wondering if you had any thoughts about limitations of use for the field.
Well, I think that there are limitations of use. It is not going to be used for sports activities necessarily.
And that'll be posted.
It could be.
Remember, it's private property,
I
owned by the
understand.
trust, so they control it.
I'm just throwing it out there as a.
We're proposing,
If they want signage, if they want other things in that parking area, just think, just thinking
It's
about.
not gonna
Put
be
it
a
in
lawn
price.
out there, it's gonna be pretty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, add things, but it's.
Yeah, I mean, by the virtue of
You got people-
maintaining the meadow area is tall grass and everything else, it's pretty much gonna really, kind of thwart any activities, organized,
Sure.
We're thinking in terms of
whatever.
passive recreation, so
Yeah.
walking, hiking, bird watching, those type of activities are what.
Paragliders landing.
No, we haven't had that. They don't, I think they go further down the mountain.
Signage.
There you go.
So
Yeah.
Greg said, I worked for the trustees reservations for 2 years, and we owned a lot of properties similar to this one that had passive recreation opportunities and had open space meadows that we mowed once a year, deal with bubblings and stuff. It was never an issue that people just walked there. I mean, sometimes we had horseback riders come through that weren't allowed, but it was never like, kids didn't go there to play Frisbee or like,
Yeah, and
so I'm just saying
I'm not
it
saying
wouldn't
this
really be an
is-
issue.
I'm just throwing some ideas out there for potential hazards or unintended not necessarily that it's likely or that it's going to happen,
Yeah.
but it's just.
But even if it did, I mean, it's not so bad if kids try to go carry a soccer ball there.
No, I don't mind, I've got kids, I'll take my kids there too.
Don't let them get their
As long as they don't mind poison ivy.
Right, right.
I think it's a great project, you know, I want to get back to where I started with this, I think this is a fantastic project, I like the access for it, I like what you're doing with it. And the extension of Brickyard is something I'm all for.
But it's mowed around here.
Except for where it's mowed, yeah. Happy to go there.
From an unintended consequences standpoint, I just want to think things through, so.
Right.
All right, I would like to ask if there are other benefits of having an accessible path, park. Are there things that are benefits, say, from the state, or what other kinds of gains are there for having an accessible path?
Well, I'd like to just respond on kind of a personal gains, not like state financial gains. I'm Roger Anderson. I'm on the board of the Scama Conservation Trust, but I've also spent many years on the board of Riverside Industries, and I've also spent my career working in the field of people with disabilities, so I'm kind of very aware of kind of the needs and desires of people who have challenges walking. And one of the things that we don't always think about is if you're, in a wheelchair or even on a walker, there's almost nowhere you can go outdoors where you don't see cars driving by. Where you can actually get far enough away that you're not on vehicle paths. And that's what we're trying to create here. And there's been a lot of excitement in the local community of people who have disabilities and work with people with disabilities about this project, because they see it as a rather, unique thing, and especially unique right in our local area, where people could go and be outside where they can only see trees in the mountain, basically. And it would be exciting for folks.
As an for the issue, and the city has funded many thousands and maybe millions of dollars on open space. There are recreation facilities at Nonotuck Park that are accessible, like there's a playground that's accessible, or there's the roads that are accessible, but there are no natural areas that are accessible for people with disabilities, and there are many people with disabilities in Easthampton who cannot experience what the CPA and the city has preserved and protected.
Jessica just went through this big thing with the ADA, the Conservation Commission members went around to all the properties trying to determine whether they were compliant. And you're lucky you had parking at some of these places, never mind handicap accessibility. More than 2/3, there's no parking to even get to some of the preserved land. So this is a unique project.
I might add that there aren't very accessible trails around, and it's a coming thing. And I think there's only this one we plan on doing. They got one at Arcadia, and the bigger one is at Bryn Mawr Stables, the former Bryn Mawr Stables in Hadley behind the malls. It borders the Fort River, and that's a long one, and that's beautiful, and that's attracting a lot of people. So this is something that's going to benefit a lot of people.
Marty and I walked that project a while back, and for kind of a passive recreation type of use, they, I would suggest, have pretty intensively developed some areas of those pathways in order to make that site accessible, whereby they've constructed bridges, elevated walkways that are so long that they had to be leveled in certain areas, for resting spots, similar to what a ramp has to be done. Observation decks that were strategically located to take in views of the river and everything else. So I guess, you can kind of use that terminology a little bit to develop in different ways, and I think that the DCR's project over there had the right thing going. when,
It's Fish and
you know,
Wildlife,
they were-
Bill.
I'm sorry,
U.S. Fish and Wildlife.
Okay.
And can I just add one thing, that we are not subject to any federal regulations regarding accessibility on this property, but we're building it as if we were. So we're building it to whatever standards we would have to meet if we were federally funded or a federally owned property.
So I have a couple of things, and then I have to bow out because my 8-week-old twins, I need to go home. And Dan can take over for me.
Just adjourn.
No, but there's still, well, whatever you guys want to do. So one question is that the project cost is $240, but you're requesting $260. And then the second thing that I noticed, and I'm assuming it was just another typo, but under section E, and this is nitpicky, and I'm sorry, but install 4 benches, but the number you quote is 6, and so I just wanted to know which was which, because it's not a huge difference, but it's a price difference.
I think 4, probably.
Yeah, I think we were. The price of 7,200 was for the 6, even though in the description it says 4.
So is it 4 or 6?
It's 6.
6 that
Right.
you're planning on
Right.
putting in?
Right.
Okay.
Right. I think we went back and forth, with some of the numbers, and try to put it together a little bit. We kind of missed a few things and some revisions.
It's totally
there.
fine, it's a huge budget.
Yeah.
So the 240 though versus 260, what's the extra 20 for? I'm sure it's in here, I'm just not seeing
Was
it.
that for the working out the fees and everything else for completing the project drawings and everything, Marty?
I'm not sure.
Because
Bill.
your fee compensation was 30,000. So
Right.
if that's the case, then there's another 10 that isn't accounted for.
That was my number based on, what I had added up in here for that. I'm not sure about the other number.
Okay.
Marty, I don't know.
You don't need to answer it now? Because we're gonna be discussing this again.
I think it's clear that we have to redo the budget
Okay.
because since we're not subject to the prevailing wage rates, and we also have to address a few other things that need attention so that you can understand it better. This hasn't been easy to put this budget and plan together for us, so we've been working on this for about 2 years now, and we're all volunteer, and
Yeah.
so we gave it our best shot so that we could present our request to you before the end of the year, and consider it a draft, maybe?
It's very professional, so please don't worry
Yeah,
about it.
good job.
All right.
I'm
No
not really sure if I
questions?
want to get involved in this because I'll probably get in trouble, but anyway. I'm with Ed on this whole thing, as far as these trees and these shrubs are concerned. When we first took this project up, we had a meadow, we had a bunch of trees and stuff that we spent money for, open space, all that, and that's just wonderful. And then we heard it was gonna be wheelchair accessibility, which is fine, that's great. But it's like we're creating some kind of a monster up here. We're spending $29,000, including these 11 grand for some kind of a, what the hell is it here? Install new native environmental shrub plants. What's that all about? We putting blueberry bushes up there, or what are we planting? What are they talking about? What kind of shrubs? It says native. Install new native environmental shrub plants. What's that all about? For 11 grand.
It is an allowance that we put in there because when we get to preparing the notice of intent, because we're working in the buffer, we're going to be obligated to using native shrubs as much as possible, actually 100% native shrubs within the buffer area. It's anticipated that we're going to have to do some planting in there, as I mentioned. We haven't fully designed it yet. areas for mitigating the runoff from the parking area. Because we're building in the buffer area and we have the runoff from the parking area. So we're gonna have to kind of mitigate that a
I'm
little
just
bit.
curious as to what you're planning there. What kind of stuff are you planning? This is natural native, what is that?
Well,
What are we talking about here?
Could be
Well,
viburnums, azaleas.
yeah.
You know,
Lots of things, but
Any number of shrubs you want?
Plants in that buffer zone.
I mean, if you're looking for
Just seems fun.
specific types.
We're
but-
planting 6 trees for $5.50 a piece, we're already in the woods. To say we're planting trees in the woods, I mean,
Wait a minute
you
now.
know what I'm
That's not in the woods.
No.
That's not in the
As I
woods.
explained it, the landscaping is kind of important as far as the development of the parking area is concerned, up along the frontage of East Street. If anybody drives by East Street, they'll see it is pretty open there. And the intent wasn't necessarily to kind of like, you know, recreate some kind of wood environment, but it was to plant the developed area, the new grade and everything else, so that it looked like it was anchored, you know, in the ground, and that the area was designed in an attractive manner.
Can I just throw something out, Bill? So from East Street to the level of the field, there's probably about a 10-foot
I know
drop
exactly
off.
what it is, and I live right down the street from
Okay,
it.
so you know that
Okay.
there's a difference in grade between East Street. So there will be an issue of runoff when we construct the parking area going down into the field. You probably know in some projects they build catchment basins or retaining ponds or things like that. We didn't feel like that fit into this property. We want to keep it more natural, so therefore the area that Bill is referring to as a rain garden would be where the drainage would go, and that any kind of natural or native shrubbery would be planted there, as well as, I think he's talking about along the area of the ramp that has to go from the parking area down to the actual trail itself. So, I mean, we're not looking to make it look like, you know, a subdivision was put in there and landscaping was put in there. That's not our intent at all, and it seems like we're getting a little confused here with the plantings. We definitely need to take another look at those and obviously go over the cost of those more carefully. But I don't want you to get the impression that we're trying to make it look overly developed. We're only going to do landscaping to the extent that we need to help with the runoff issue.
I totally understand.
Okay, I want to make sure everybody does,
I
though.
know, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah.
I know you have to go, Alexis.
Yeah.
I would just make the suggestion of the board that we put this over the next meeting.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
While the figures are reworked, and I don't know if the other members, but I certainly want to take a ride out there, because it's a little hard sometimes. I've gone by there 1,000 times on East Street, but I can't, you know, you're trying to visualize it and give us a chance to do that, and come back and with some new numbers and reopen the discussion, because I know we have another project too that we have to go, and I know you guys.
Yeah.
That would be my suggestion. but-
Move
Oh,
the
it's
table.
Yeah.
I
So
would,
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just want to clarify one thing with folks on the committee, and just make sure that I'm understanding it correctly, which I think I am. So that's my neighborhood, I know the area quite well. The trees and plants that they're putting in is not in the circle that people are gonna be walking in. It's only, correct me if I'm wrong, in the parking area to both mitigate neighbor issues and mitigate the cover.
You're talking about neighbor issues on East Street?
Well, you know.
There's only like 3 houses in that whole neighborhood. With the Torrey's house,
Well, but if
which is
you're
right by
gonna-
the gardens,
but you're plunking
and
in
where's the
parking
rest of the
lot.
house?
I think Gary Golis, who lives on the side, requested that we do some planting along his border.
You're
So
plunking
that's
in a
what we're
parking
talking
lot where
about.
there wasn't one, so you might have potentially wonky neighbors. So you're putting in some sort of landscape design that will blend in with everything else to make people okay with the fact that you're putting in a parking lot where there wasn't one. You can be grumpy about it, I'm just saying what I'm saying. So, am I right about that, that you're not putting trees out in the field?
Absolutely right,
I think I
yes.
said it 3 times
Okay, yeah.
already, that, you know, we were interested in, you know, working on the area where we have to do a fair amount of regrading, also to get the parking area in there, the slope sidewalks,
I hear
you know, et cetera. The only other thing I can say, I don't know why we're getting so upset about putting landscaping in. I just, you know.
We're clearing 18 grand, that's why. That's the reason, we're clearing $18,000.
It would, look, it's an estimate, okay? And it's based on prevailing wage rates.
All right, folks, chill out.
I have a
Lack
motion
of a
to
better
table.
word.
Can I-
Yes.
Table, move to table.
No,
Motion's on
let
the
her-
floor.
Hold on, let her.
When you go out to the site, can I recommend that you visit it from East Green Street? Park your car in the cul-de-sac, wait in a week or a week and a half until they're finished with work. Then you can walk around the entire meadow and see why it's not an athletic field. It's a meadow. You can see Mount Tom, and you can understand at the far end where the parking lot is going to be, why we want to put some landscaping around that, but it does not change the natural appearance of the entire field. Because you're not going to be able to see that from East Street, because you can't park your car there. So the easiest way is to go to East Green when the culvert's done, walk it, there's a mowed area around it, and I think you'll understand the landscaping at the end by the parking lot and the entire rest of the field.
Thank you
The
very much.
only thing I can say is that if that is a bone of contention to the potential funding of the project, then it could be taken out of the budget and somehow, you know, it'll get worked in somehow with volunteers or raising some other funds or whatever. But I think it's unfair to kind of hold up the potential that this project has for a landscaping budget that's an estimate right now based on, you know, prevailing wage rates. And obviously, we're just told that prevailing wage rates won't have to apply to this project, so we can kind of see that budget going down a little bit. But as I've also mentioned, there are other potential issues that we've got to kind of work with the Conservation Commission about, you know, working with vegetated areas to mitigate the stormwater runoff from the parking area. That's important. And I think the budget's important for, you know, creating the accessibility to the open space here.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to table this and we'll talk about it at our January meeting. If we have other questions and/or if you, when you revise the budget and have other figures, we'll run everything through Jamie, if that's okay with you, Jamie. Marty, you have contact information, you're good.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to excuse myself. Thank you.
I just want to say that the January meeting is January 15th. It's Thursday night at 6:30 in this conference room.
Might be a good stuff.
I'd like to thank you all for coming. too.
It's
Thank
the
you.
third Thursday.
Thank you for listening.
The crucial part.
Like lemons and some red maple.
Sending that up, the total goal. I got it on my spreadsheet.
Thanks for
Electronic. After this whole press sign.
Are not able to go I usually get a confirmation.
Guess I'll move up and down. I'll get within earshot of it.
And when that happens, I would love to get you spelling of your name correctly.
You're it?
We understand that's on their children.
Oh, yeah, I can see this.
This is like,
There you go. Tricky.
Come back with that scrub here.
Yeah. I got that.
Remember.
Are we ready to?
Don't you think it's a fair point? Yeah, I was just introducing myself.
Oh, okay.
No, so I'm Jamie.
Maybe we'll get together. He introduced himself and we're all shaking hands. I'd like to help, only because we're kind of running a little bit of time here.
good point.
Our next, Harry will take it up at the next meeting. Our next item of business is Easthampton Park and Rec's new soccer field for Nonotucket. As I recall this, Jamie, and you probably can help us, going back, this was sort of two projects were proposed, baseball and soccer, and I think it was member Schumann who said maybe we could come up with one combined program or combined project. And then when that figure came back, it was a little excessive. So it was kind of on Park and Rec to determine which of the two projects they wanted to go with first, and kind of we gave at least and I think that came back from, and I won't put it squarely on Mr. Mason, but Mr. Mason or the Park and Rec Commission or a combination of both, came back and felt that the baseball should be funded first because they had been in the pipeline longer, and kind of we left it with soccer to go back. So I know Chief Motter's here, and he said that John Mason from Park and Rec was unable to come, and Alexis said that he knows very well that this will be carried over to the January meeting. But any questions that we have, if we have them tonight, we can relay them either to Jamie or the chief to John, and I'm sure he'll get back to us with his responses. So, Chief Motter, if you want to kind of say where we're at new, or if you know, I mean, again, I'm not trying to put you on the spot either, because I know you're...
Yeah, I just asked John the day he submitted this where we were on this. About the only change from the original two-project proposal for the soccer fields is, and I think even when it merged into one, the irrigation system has been scaled back to the new field.
Okay.
And the existing, what they call the varsity field.
Yeah.
With these pipes built for future expansion work to be done by Park and Rec employees. I think the original irrigation portion of it was...
It's 45K here.
Yeah, the original irrigation was over 200,000 alone. And that was to do the entire soccer complex.
So we're just doing, or the proposal is to just do the varsity field?
The varsity field and the new field.
And the new field, which is, as you come into the parking area to the way to the right?
It's straight in front of you. It's the far back corner.
Okay.
It was cleared, but for some reason when the project was done, they never finished it. They never York raked it, grubbed it, nothing. It's just every year it gets overgrown, and Williston goes in and brush hogs it for us to keep the growth down. But it was part of the original project, and for some reason, taking that small corner out of it saved enough money to make it happen.
Okay. And I guess, and then I'll open up to the rest of the committee. Obviously, I haven't gone through the new numbers here, but in terms of use of soccer, I know it's a very growing sport. I know some of the ones that have younger children who probably don't let them go. But who uses it? I know it's Park and Rec leagues. I don't know about, I'll call them suburban leagues, if they're still called that around here.
Right now, I would say...
Varsity, women, men.
There's 4 high school teams, boys and girls, varsity and JV. There is the Easthampton Rec Leagues, and there's also Easthampton teams that are in the Pioneer Valley Junior Soccer League. In the summer months, the boys and girls high school teams participate in the Pioneer Valley Summer Soccer League. And Easthampton also has spring soccer. So the soccer fields are getting used. There's 3 seasons of soccer now. It's no longer you play soccer in the fall. This past year, because of use in one of what's known as the junior varsity field, John would know the numbers, but it was staggering the number of games that are averaged on that field a year. I want to say it was in excess of 60 games a year.
Can you guess how many kids are involved in the programs?
From kindergarten through high school, I'd say there's over 300.
Over 300.
You go up there during the fall on a weeknight, you can't find a field to practice on. And 2 to 3 nights a week, there's a group of adults that go up there and use what's called pug nets. They're small nets, and they try to find space in between fields to play on. So it's not just the high school and youth leagues. There's adult pickup games up there all the time. Sadly for them, there's not really much open space. This past year, they shut down the park for spring and summer soccer. So the teams were forced to play at Whitebrook, the old soccer field there, which is
soggy,
marginal at best. Yeah, soggy. The remnants of the old baseball field.
Would you say there's more people involved with soccer than there is baseball? Or do you have people that play baseball play soccer also?
Yeah, there's a crossover. I would say because of the age continuance in soccer over baseball and softball, the soccer numbers are probably larger because they're playing soccer 3 seasons a year now.
Right.
In Easthampton. Now, you can play year-round now, fortunately or unfortunately, depending how you look at it, but I think soccer's numbers are probably a little bigger overall because you have the older ages playing year-round.
All the soccer fields that we're talking about are in the way back of.
Yeah, in the far back of
There are
Nantucket Park.
other soccer fields that I'm unaware of that are in Nantucket Park besides that.
Just those. The only other place that gets used is Whitebrook. When you pull into Whitebrook, the parking lot to the left, the elevated field.
Right, the soccer field.
Way back when, that used to be the only place for Easthampton youth soccer was there. And it was a nightmare then when the program wasn't as big. Now, they have bigger fields, but they have triple the number of players that they used to have.
If I remember correctly, I think John said something about there's some softball leagues that play there too, in those fields? Some kind of a co-ed softball or something?
Yeah, he has a co-ed softball league, which is still using Daly Field in the corner. They use, Williston lets them use their softball field, and they play at Whitebrook, only because the 2 new fields were not ready for play this year. They will be moving back to the softball complex next year.
Chief, we're always looking for either in-kind contributions, and I know in the past, like baseball did some dugout and all those things. Was there a new scoreboard put down there? Was that volunteer fund?
That was
fundraiser? I know there's something now for the, mainly
Yeah.
for the high school, I guess it would be, but I didn't know exactly how that funding went. I know there was a lot of volunteers like in
That
there.
scoreboard, which I was a member of, was a group of parents of soccer players and former Easthampton High School soccer players who their, I don't know what you call it, inferiority complex was soccer was the only sport in Easthampton that has never had their own scoreboard. Football has a scoreboard, baseball has a scoreboard, softball, basketball. Soccer never had a scoreboard. So there was a drive that had nothing to do with Easthampton High School boosters, Easthampton Youth Soccer. It was completely independent of that to fundraise the money for that scoreboard. There's talk of trying to find a decent wireless one that can be used by junior varsity, by Pioneer Valley teams, that can be moved as John and George move the fields around to save the grass. Easthampton Youth Soccer also pays all of the treatments through True Green, I think it is, to seed, fertilize, treat that entire area. That all comes out of, and I think John included that.
$23K.
Yeah, it's $23,000 a year. They also built a concession stand. They added bathrooms. They actually, 2 or 3 years ago, redid the bathrooms to make them ADA compliant. It is, one of the added bonuses is it brings in a lot of out-of-town people on weekends who pay park admission to go play soccer. Depending on the league, if it's a Easthampton Youth Soccer sanctioned, Easthampton Youth Soccer pays for the players from out of town to get into the park. So either way, the teams that are coming in, the city, and that's all general fund money, is benefiting from these soccer fields.
That goes to the general fund, not to the
I'm
park?
pretty sure that.
Not to the revolving fund for the park?
No, I think the usage fee, the field use fees.
Not 100%, but I think.
The chief has a rate.
Yeah.
That's a question we could ask John for certain.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Melissa, we can also ask Melissa.
I think you know that.
I don't offhand, I know that.
I don't
have everybody
Most revenues have to go into the
General
general
fund.
fund.
But
And then they have to be, they have to be appropriated as part of the
Right.
capital
Because Park and Rec
projects.
does have a revolving fund, but that's only for donations.
Yeah, they have their Richmond fund, they have a field use fee. If you wanted to bring a co-ed softball league in Easthampton, you have to pay a per game or per season fee. And I know Park and Rec keeps that money because it goes directly back to field maintenance and hiring umpires. But I'm pretty sure that the admission to the park is purely general fund money.
Yeah, I noticed, Mr. Cannon, did your estimates too high? If you have a chance, okay, when they come back next month, ask, is planting and seeding is outlined here, and there's a line item to hydro seed and fertilizer, it comes out to $24,000. Then there's a second line for patching and seeding the areas disturbed by the irrigation system installation. So why not put the irrigation system in before you seed it? Then you don't have to patch it.
Well, this is for the existing field, because they have to lay it open to trench it,
All right.
and then the branch lines.
So that would be for the
That
field,
answers
that's, the varsity field,
my
that's.
Right. He did the two separate projects. He also did the combined and then a separated. And the baseball softball field project came in on budget with his numbers. The only exception being there was some drainage issues there existing. I think it was the tune of $10,000 that Easthampton Little League paid for, because then it didn't have to be prevailing wage. We took it outside the scope of the work, saving the money, because that $10,000 worth of work that Little League paid for would have been about $25,000 worth of prevailing wage work. So his numbers for the baseball softball project were exactly on.
Because this would be prevailing, this has to be prevailing.
This has to be prevailing.
Because it's a city-owned project and it's being administered by a city
That answers my
organization.
question, why we don't put it in before we seed it.
The original proposal, Easthampton Youth Soccer and Easthampton Little League were the ones that were gonna seek the money. And we were told by the state that because it's city property, it had to be the park, unless the two youth sports organizations had a lease with the city, which nobody wanted to get into.
Is there any other questions for the chief, or that we want to have Mr. Mason? Mr. Mason did, Alexis did say before she left that Mr. Mason is going to come back.
So any questions that you would like that we didn't answer tonight, I can forward to him?
My question's answered almost.
But if you do have any, if you come over, will you reread the project?
So the
When
only
anyone
thing-
rereads the project, they have them, just email them to you, Jamie, and you'll get them to Mr. Mason.
Yeah, if you can, I mean, the sooner the better.
Right.
Just so that way he has some time to prepare answers and not rushing at the last
Right, the
minute
last,
to
you
try
know,
to
last date.
find these out. I'm going to talk to Melissa about the revenues from the admissions versus the revenues for, what's the,
He explained, I understand.
okay, so we don't need more clarification?
See, I think, in listening to that, I do think part of a salary comes out of that revenue for the person that collects the revenue. So I don't know if, I believe that goes back to general, then comes
Yeah,
back to
it would have
pay the
to.
salary.
It would have to. And the revolving funds, if they're donations, they go into revolving funds, but general revenues.
But a lot of it comes back.
See, the fewer pages there is, the fewer questions I have.
Is there anything else before we let the chief go at least?
Well, yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Just quick, because I'm trying,
Yeah,
there's
that's
no
okay.
map on here, and I'm a very visual person, so we're talking about how many, this is one additional field, is that right, or two?
Well, the plan is to just, it'll be, not being a soccer guy, I don't get it, but it'll be cleared and pitched, so it can be used as one full-size field. However, the plan is that it'll be set up, it'll be pitched for one field, but it'll be able to be broken up into either 3 or 4 smaller modified fields for the younger grades.
Got a satellite, if it's helpful, and I'm kind of curious too, I just want to make sure.
And that's the new one.
So this patch here, let's see where I'm at here. That's Williston.
It's Williston, so it's
We gotta go
back.
there somewhere, right? Yeah, probably right there. Yeah, so it's this area right here.
Right.
As you can tell,
This is the one you're gonna make,
This is-
create a new field.
yep, it's already been cleared. It was cleared when the project was done. It's usually vegetation about this high. The kids call it the tick factory. Bill Cullen from Williston once a year is kind enough to come up and brush hog to keep it reasonable, but it was never York rate when the whole project was done. So there's rocks in there, there's hunks of metal in there, all kinds of stuff, but it's this corner right here.
And is this the varsity field?
This is the
And
varsity
you're gonna
field
put
right here.
irrigation into this? This
There'll
is
be
also part of it,
irrigation
right?
here and irrigation here.
New field and irrigation and
Yeah.
just irrigation.
And then they're gonna pipe to be
Yeah,
able
there'll
to
be
do
branch
these
lines.
future.
So that in the future you could
If I
possibly.
remember right, there's a fire hydrant here with a 6-inch main, so the line will come out, feed this field, and there'll be tees to go and feed these fields as well. There won't be any pipes, there won't be any heads, but the pipe will be big enough to support it, and there'll be a tee there, so all they have to do is go build it out. One of the other,
Thank you.
there was a lot of questions.
I don't know about this technology yet. You guys can say-
This is where the technology is helpful, is
It's
that?
not gonna come right away.
So there's three other fields that are gonna be
Sit
set
here
there?
and do this all right.
It's gonna be set up to be one, but it can be broken down to 3 or
No, so
4.
it's the one new field, and then the irrigation stubs are gonna go to.
They'll be set out so they can, the open space that, I think sometimes it's broken down to as many as 8 fields. One of the questions that came up from, I think it was Easthampton Youth Soccer, there was questions about the need for irrigation. Right now, to keep that, it's at the mercy of Mother Nature. They run water cannons, which they're set, it's a huge sprinkler, and the hose retracts,
It's like real.
and it's not the most efficient system. Somebody has to go out there. Usually what happens, thank God George works for the city, because John would be lost without him, but George would go out there at 3 o'clock and set the water cannon, and come back at 7 o'clock when it's done watering the field and turn it off. They're not the most efficient, they leak, so an irrigation system that's controlled by a computer with rain gauges and set to go on certain zones would be much more efficient use of water than those big monster water cannons.
It's gonna be the same thing as a baseball field, right?
Yeah, the baseball, the 2 new fields, actually the 4, everything that's in that hub, the 4 and the 1 off to the side, all have sprinkler systems now.
You could provide an aerial truck every once in a while. Do the whole thing path, with a cannon or something. Any other questions? We'll put this in, we'll go over the numbers, and any questions, I said, get them to Jamie and for Mr. Mason, but as I think Jamie and Mr. Mason both would appreciate it, sooner the better on those. So
I think we're pretty familiar with this project.
I know, again, I want to go back, I got the old, I didn't bring it tonight with me.
Used to have colored
When it was
pictures.
combined, so I'll just kind of go
I
back.
mean, I'm gonna do a comparison.
No, I was just gonna go back and look at it, I'm sure it's probably fairly close.
Probably, because I know at one point there was the whole irrigation system was over 200,000.
Right, I know, at one time it was, I think it pushed the whole dual project.
Yeah, and it's interesting how you come back a second time when it's happened twice.
Well, it's like buying a car, you don't always buy it on the first trip into the showroom.
Very true.
Okay, I guess we're all set, Chief, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, and I guess, Jamie, if I have it right, the next meeting is going to be January 15th, correct?
Yes. And I believe that John Mason won't be at that meeting either.
Oh, okay.
That's pretty slippery.
So I think that's also, if there are questions that can be emailed, he can respond back to, via email, or he can respond to Chief Motter, who can answer
Okay,
good questions for him.
Okay, very good. The only other business we have is, and I don't know if this was kind of a long meeting tonight, I know Jamie probably would like to get moving on the ordinance stuff, but do we want to do that tonight, or?
I'd rather wait, I just got one comment on them, and the only comment that I have that I don't like, and I think I've said it before, is that the mayor shouldn't be allowed to appoint. If the committee doesn't appoint the vacancy, I can't agree that the mayor should be making the appointment. When this law was originally constructed, the appointments were taken under consideration, and that the appointments would be made by the boards. If the board doesn't appoint and the mayor appoints, it's not a representative of that board. That's the one thing that I have a real problem with on the stuff that you've got in here right now.
Okay, I mean, it's just a proposal. Obviously, any changes can be.
Can I comment on it?
Yeah, I just want to respond.
All right, go ahead.
That obviously it would still need the approval of the city council, because any appointments need the approval of the city council. So it's not the mayor's appointment. It's just as a way to.
Yes, it is.
With the committee that is defunct, the mayor is allowed to make an appointment. And with the committee that isn't defunct but isn't meeting or making appointments, this committee could find itself in a situation where there are not enough members not enough members to meet quorum.
Okay, we haven't had that. We've had vacancies, but we've never not been able to meet a quorum.
Sure, but that could happen, so it was just a suggestion.
And all I'm saying is the intent of the original law was such that the committees were responsible to make a representative appointment, and that the city council of the 7 members was granted 3 positions on the council, and that those appointments were clear, okay? And the way that appointments are made were intended.
The mayor does appoint the mayor appoints the committee members of the planning board, the
The
conservation
planning board, the
commission.
conservation commissions were
The
not
historic-
created by ordinance. This committee is created by an ordinance.
But the mayor appoints those members who are then confirmed by the city council. So if the mayor appoints those members to the boards and then the boards then appoint those members to,
That's not true. The planning board took an election and sent somebody here, that's why I came.
right?
So it was the planning board decision to make you the
Right.
planning board.
Right.
But I think what Jamie's saying is ultimately, before
Ultimately,
that, you
you're
were
on,
appointed
you're
by
on
the
the planning board because at one point in time, the mayor.
Oh, I see what you mean, yeah.
The mayor
well, yeah.
appointed you
If
to the
want
planning
yeah.
board.
But you volunteer, you submit your name, and then if she accepts it, then it goes before the council, and then they appoint you.
Right, I
to the
mean,
planning.
no one's gonna get appointed to a board who doesn't volunteer.
Right, I guess, thinking I got against what Ed's saying, I was on the historic commission for like 2 years, and we couldn't find anybody to come to be a member representing the historic commission. And we have a new member here that joined the historic commission probably about a year ago, where it's been 7 months ago, and I asked him if he'd be interested. And if it wasn't for him volunteering, we wouldn't have anybody from the historic commission. So there are commissions out there and boards who don't want to have a member. They don't want to be bothered with it. So if a case like that, maybe the mayor does have to get involved. I mean, I wouldn't know, how do you get somebody to represent those that board?
Well,
They don't have
then
a
maybe the
volunteer.
city
What would-
council should make the
What would you
appointment.
do?
I would have the
Well,
city
yeah,
council,
okay.
because this is under ordinance.
I just want to give the calendar that I left in here.
We almost had it. I will agree with one thing Ed said, and Jamie is technically right that the mayor makes the appointment, the city council approves of, but as one and Ed sat on the city council, he knows, and as I sit on the city council, unless there's a glaring deficiency in what the council sees in a candidate, we usually defer to, wouldn't you agree? There's been very few appointments as the mayor, because it's tough to get volunteers, so, it is really, even though the council does approve it, it's, kind of not like a Supreme Court nominee in the Senate where they have hearings and debates over the candidate. It's pretty matter of fact approval, as I said, unless there's a glaring issue or something.
Yeah, like the guy got arrested for carrying guns or something.
I just
So,
wanted
I
to.
mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is, how can we fill empty seats that aren't being filled by the boards? I don't care if it's the mayor or the city council or, some third other body. It's just like,
It's what the law says. This ordinance says that the representative committees that are required in the state law make the appointments. Now, if those committees are defunct, like say the historical commission no longer exists or something, then a member of that, if the commission no longer exists, then the law needs to be changed to take them off of the planning committee. But they can't be because it's required by the state law. Now, if the historical committee didn't have enough people or couldn't find a volunteer eventually, and the mayor had the ability to appoint, he could appoint someone who had absolutely no interest in the historical preservation of the community. He could appoint one of the developers to sit in that seat, if that's the way that he thought.
and if the historic commission had a vested interest in making sure that people with historic,
And that's why.
then they should take it upon themselves to fill those vacancies when those vacancies occur.
Exactly.
But when they continue for 2 years, there's a point of time at which they are now not doing their service they're not providing.
Well, then the mayor needs to reappoint people to that committee, doesn't he?
Trying to find somebody. That's the
Exactly.
problem. That's the whole
Exactly.
problem.
Okay, I think
Trying to find
we're going around in circles.
Yeah, we're going. And again,
So is there a suggestion, do you have a suggestion for?
I say leave the law the way it is. That's
So
my
you would rather,
suggestion.
you would like to see vacancies remain on the.
If there's a vacancy and a quorum can be maintained, then the quorum can be maintained, okay? And the business of the committee can go on until the appointing, the planning division or the conservation commission can make an appointment.
I'd like to continue this conversation in a future meeting.
Me too, it's not a-
the whole ordinance thing. I mean, but I do think this is a wake-up to, maybe we can all go back and kind of reread all the changes, and I think it's gonna require one almost meeting that is strictly on that ordinance so that we can go through it, because I mean, just to have it sit there and do one thing, one meeting is, we'll be here for the next 10 years trying to. And I think maybe, and again, will be Alexis's call as the chair, but maybe at some point, if we can get some of these projects, we could set one meeting together, go through all our changes on the ordinance and see if we can't come up with a document that we can forward through the process, and that would be my suggestion. But hearing none, is there anything else, Jamie, before we?
Yeah, I just want to make the announcement that we did get the state match from fiscal year 14, the tax.
Is that 11 million extra they were gonna give us?
Yeah, so,
Well, not us, give 11 million, they're gonna give the whole state.
right, so the state's match came to, sorry, I have the exact number. Somewhere. There's 207,900, no, 207,000, roughly $208,000, matching this, what the city raised in tax revenue from fiscal year 14.
What did we raise?
The CPA raised,
That was less than I hoped, right?
yes, it
Yes,
was.
I
So
think at the end, the budget wasn't as.
the CPA raised 370,873.
Okay, so.
The
can't-
first round distribution from the state was 116,695. The second round distribution was 56,000. The third round distribution was 34,000 for a total of 207,920, which came to a total of a 56% match. Last year, the previous year, we had a much higher percent match, but then prior to that, for like the last 3 or 4 years, the
Was
state
going
had
down.
only gone to like 20%. When the law was initially passed by the state, the matches were close to 100%. The state has to appropriate extra money from the surplus of the state's budget. They put the CPA 25 million second, and the first 25 million was to, I forgot what the other surplus was going to, but the surplus at the end of the year was only like 40 million, not 50 million, so the CPA only got 15 million, not the 25 million. So that's why the match was lower.
So the bottom line is we got about $500,000 altogether, so that's what we can spend this year.
Well, this has already been figured into this year's budget.
Yeah.
So when we did the budget last March, we had estimated what the match would be. We estimated that the match was actually gonna be lower than this. So the match that we got from the state, the remaining monies that we didn't estimate, will be available for the CPA in the following fiscal years. It'll just get moved to the undesignated.
So we'll have some extra money, or I won't say extra money, because it's there, in July when the year turns, some of that.
Yeah, so.
We can't access it till July.
Right, the CPA in the budget estimated that the state was gonna give $160,000. So the remaining $48,000 sits in a revenue account generating interest, but because it wasn't budgeted, the CPA doesn't have access to it in the budget.
Till July.
But in the next fiscal year, it'll just roll over into what we call the undesignated fund, which is good, because had we estimated, we're gonna have 300,000 in the CPA's budget, and then the state only gave us the 208,000, then we'd have to figure out where that $90,000 is coming from, And we're fortunate that we didn't approve it, or we didn't appropriate that money to a project.
CPA free cash.
Do we have any money coming back from projects that are out there? I mean, that would.
Yeah, we've gotten some small amounts of money
Yeah,
back.
it's not much, but every dime counts.
Yeah, so,
Got some coming back from the clock.
Yeah, we
Clock
got like
working?
$5 coming back from the clock.
Yeah.
well, okay,
Working too,
so,
haven't it?
if you guys want to, the clock, has 5,346
Yeah.
remaining. I've been talking with the, what's his name? So what's it, Williston? And Jeff Tannett, who's the keeper of the clock, and there are a couple more things. While the clock is running, there are more capital projects that he would like to do.
Unbelievable.
So I've asked them to come back with a budget and a timeline to complete that. And we're having a meeting in January, which will go over that. And
Hopefully you can maybe
Hopefully-
report
hopefully-
back at the gym.
yeah, I mean, but it's one of these things. It's they want to spend it. They see it as their money.
I'm trying to come up with.
As long as they're still, as long as it still fits for capital improvements for the repairs of that, for that clock, that's the only money that the city has to maintain that clock, and it is the city's clock.
Any capital improvements and repairs, or can they use that money for repairs in the clock?
You can't use it for repairs, you can't use it for maintenance, but capital improvement, or
Restoration.
maintenance that goes on deferred long enough eventually becomes a capital improvement, so.
So what are they spending $5 on it for? What are they gonna be doing?
They're coming back to me with a budget and a timeline.
Maybe they need some new
And
They still want enough to become capital.
This has been going on. You could put somebody on Pluto.
Hey, but it's
This is gonna
working
start.
now. Hey, it's working.
Maybe they're gonna put a digital one.
Hey, I moved to adjourn.
I second that. Well, can I, somebody else has to
I'll
second.
second.
Okay. We have a motion to second adjourn.
All
All in favor? Aye. Thank you. See you guys all in